Hi, everyone. Welcome to Existential Side Quests. I'm your host, Jenna. Kimber? Just kidding. Kimber couldn't be with us today. She had a personal emergency, very last minute. She's very sorry that she couldn't be here. But I'm here because, as we say in the Moira Press, the show must go on. I will admit I'm a little nervous doing this by myself. You wouldn't think so with a Leo sun in the fifth. So I have this new tarot deck. So I pulled some cards to ask how today's show is going to go. And it was actually a super rude pull. So no, because it's kind of spot on. So Jensen, if you're in the audience, I know that you love this deck. And me and this deck are working through our issues. It's interesting that this deck came to me well before eclipse season, but I didn't have a motivation to open it until eclipse season, not even thinking that anything to do with the eclipse. But here we are, and it's been a little bit difficult to get things going. Hey, Jill, thanks for being here. Excited to see you in the chat. Before we jump into the astrology, because I did want to talk about the transits, I was thinking that would be a perfect topic since it feels like that's exactly why. Of course, it's exactly why, as above, so below. Things are a little bit chaotic right now with sudden upsets, changes of plans, asking for us to just surrender and kind of go with the flow, even though a lot of people I know are experiencing things that are putting them in a state of shock. I'm in Maine, and down in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, a friend of mine just said they have officially hit snow totals that are at the blizzard of 78 levels. So there's some wisdom in this. Like, what is this? What is the wisdom of what's going on? It just dawned on me that could have something to do with the eclipse season of 78. It would be interesting to look at that. But anyways, what I pulled in preparation for this episode from this new deck, it's a beautiful deck, but we're not vibing very well. The 9 of Pentacles reversed, which has to do with self-doubt and insecurity or superficiality, which honestly, I was a little bit worried about all of that. I was doubting going on air, and I was like, oh, am I going to be able to do it justice? So the superficiality side of things. And I was like, all right, give me some more information. 10 of Pentacles reversed. I swear I shuffled many times. And that has to do with like an unstable foundation or like a feeling of loss. And for sure, I'm feeling that loss without my co-host Kimber here. And I was like, can you just give me some positive, any sort of words of encouragement, deck, please? And what it gave me was the 7 of Swords reversed. So it's doing its best to keep with the energy of the eclipse while also calling me on my stuff and asking me to step into my power. The 7 of Swords reversed, it can have to do with like a return to consciousness or like having some level of like confession, clearing the air. It can also have to do with avoiding consequences, which I guess by going on air, I'm avoiding the consequence of not, because as they say, the show must go on. So that all being said, I figured out how to share my screen on here, which is, really exciting. We're actually moving Moira Press over to Reddit, but we're still going to be doing the streams in the StreamYard. So, all right, here we go. Sharing screen. Yeah, don't show me those tips again. All right, here we go. Can everybody see that? Nod your head. Okay, you're all nodding. That's good. I'll just imagine it. This is the solar eclipse map sent for Boston, Massachusetts, which is a big city near me. And this happened last Tuesday, but we're still very much in the energy of this solar eclipse. Now, this eclipse season, we have this solar eclipse from last week, and then we're going to have the lunar eclipse on March 3rd. So right now we're in like that solar energy and the shadow of the lunar energy. And the solar energy, a solar eclipse is very observable. Think about the sun in the sky. It's a very observable thing. The sun shining light down on things so that we can observe, we can interact. We have the energetic encouragement as well as the frequency of encouragement to manifest things into reality, manifest behaviors into action, manifest the next step on our journey. So when we're looking at this map, we can always adjust it for different locations, but also keep in mind where this eclipse energy, the sun and the moon together here, where is that 28 degrees of Aquarius coming into your chart? Because there's some wisdom within where that's coming into your chart so that you can understand what it is that this eclipse is actually shedding light on. It was really interesting. Last week, Kimber and I and our friend Andre we hang out every 2 weeks on Zoom just to catch up and talk astrology. We all went to the forest school. So we're all evolutionary astrologers, and it's kind of like a peer support group in a way. But we took a field trip this past week to one of our old tutors from the forest school, Ryan's class, because he offers these weekly classes. And I was like, let's do a field trip. Let's shake things up a little bit, lean into this eclipse energy. And Ryan was talking all about the eclipse, and it was so interesting because he was talking about how eclipses are about alignment. And we all kind of can feel into that. Think about the fact that the sun and the moon are literally aligning with the nodes. That's why we have an eclipse. He said when this alignment happens, everything is kind of landing down on one plane. We no longer have like the sun and the earth and the moon kind of all functioning in this like multivariate kind of three-dimensional or beyond, if you really want to get into the technicalities, plane. It all kind of collapses onto one plane. And what happens when that collapse happens is all that alignment, the window of that plane completely opens and everything dissolves into what we call singularity. It was really interesting to hear Ryan use the word singularity because that's one of my favorite books from childhood. It's a book about, here we are on side quests. I guess I didn't even need to talk to somebody else in order to lead me down this path. It's a little bit of insight into how an out of bounds Gemini moon works, which I have natally. I should put up the chart ticker. But basically in the book Singularity, there was a portal in the attic of their great uncle's house. And when you'd step into that portal, 1 second equaled 1 hour. So it's talking about time collapsing in on itself, which is sort of what we're talking about when we look at eclipses. Now, I'm way more familiar with lunar eclipse energy. That's what I've studied with Murray Beauchamp. And I'm just going to flash his book because I think it's absolutely a glorious, try not to get the glare there. This is absolutely a glorious book explaining all about the astrology of the lunar nodes and the wisdom, the cosmic counseling that comes in through that, through the cryptic cycle. It's interesting. There was just a OPA talk from one of my old tutors as well, Lisa Jones, on the Sorrow series for OPA a week ago. So if you're really interested in learning more about the lunar stuff, you could check that out. Or maybe we'll talk about it eventually because this is a total passion of mine. Well, with the solar eclipse, we do have Bernadette Brady and her studies on the solar eclipse. But what basically was found out that we can't really, like where we're at now with theories around solar eclipses, they don't really have a birth to the same level that the lunar eclipse has a birth. But what we can do is look at the eclipse over time. So right here, we have this instance of this Sorrow series of solar eclipse. And 18 years ago, so the nodal return, it's an 18-year cycle. 18 years ago in 2008, that year might ring a bell for people if you're thinking about the stock market and you're thinking about the housing market and what we experienced as a world and economic complete disruption. So when we think about the disruptive level of this Sorrow series that we're in right now, that the Sorrows that this eclipse a week ago belonged to, that level of upset and disruption is what we're actually experiencing right now. It's from the same cycle. So these eclipses are all part of one family together. So now if I pull up the chart from February 7th, 2008, I'm going to pull it up here. You can actually see that, again, it was an Aquarius sun and moon, and the nodes at that time were actually in Aquarius. So we're not really looking at the nodes other than to understand that that's why the collapse is happening. But when we're interpreting an eclipse, we're really looking at where the sun and the moon are coming in, or where the sun and the moon are coming in on a chart. What jumped out at me in this chart from 2008 was the fact that one of the strongest, if not the strongest aspect, wasn't other than, of course, the conjunction here, was this Saturn right here in an obsession angle with Neptune. That's called a quindecile. And when we talk about the Ptolemaic aspects, we're talking about a sextile, a trine, a conjunction, an opposition, or a square, the 5 major aspects. When we start looking at minor aspects, we're talking about semi-sextiles, which is a 30-degree angle, semi-squares, which is 45. But we're also talking about the quincunx. Everyone kind of knows the quincunx. It has this almost, it's like Ptolemaic favorite little sibling or something like that, because it's the 150-degree aspect that makes the traditional yod, the finger of God. But for me, I like to take it in between that 150-degree and the straight opposition to this 165-degree angle, the quindecile. And you can see Neptune here at 2134 and Saturn here at 6 degrees, 30 minutes. That's only 4 minutes away from exactitude. And the reason why I bring this up is because in the map of last week's eclipse, we once again have Saturn and Neptune in very close conversation. But instead of it being about this obsession between vision and creation, it's almost like if we think back to 2008, those superpowers are like that, the banks, the leading developers, the leaders of our economy, the 1%, would you have it? We can almost think about like, what were they obsessed with back then? What was that obsession with trying to reconcile the market, that obsession with trying to reconcile the vision of Neptune, the dream of Neptune, with putting that actually into purpose, into manifestation with Saturn. And Saturn at that time was here in Virgo, which Saturn in Virgo wants to, perfect things, really do that work that matters. And Saturn has that diligence and discipline to work over time. And back then, it's almost like we're seeing like, okay, these powerhouses in our economy, or we could just say the economy in general, was in this obsession with trying to manifest into reality these really kind of out there Aquarian dreams that Neptune had. So when we see that, it's an echo back to those times of like, ooh, what was Neptune dreaming about in Aquarius at that time? And what was our obsession, quindecile angle, obsession with manifesting that into reality? And how can we pull forward some of that wisdom of the time and understand that now these two giants are really trying to work together, just like maybe we were trying to force them to work together 18 years ago, the last iteration of this solar Saros cycle. Okay, with all that being said, now I clicked back over and I could see there's people in the chat. Hey, Andy. Hey, Camille. I'm so glad that you guys could be here, and Jill too. This is awesome. And in case you missed it, Kimber couldn't be here today. She had a personal emergency. She's very sad to miss everything. Can you talk about the larger eclipse cycle, Andy's saying? I can't remember what you called it. The Saros series. Yes, the larger eclipse cycle. So the Saros series is talking about like the family of eclipses that this belongs to. So back in 2008, February of 2008, we had this solar eclipse that came in. And the wisdom or the experiences of that eclipse are from the same family as the eclipse that we're in right now. So let me look at the recently. I actually was thinking we could talk about this in terms of USA too, if we wanted to go that route. It can be a little intense though. But if we look at this eclipse series from back then, I know that the nodes are in a different position, and it's more about the map of the intention or the map of the information in the sky. Yes, right now we have a south node in Virgo rather than Leo, but still the eclipse energy where we're actually focusing on it is this Aquarian nature of that sun-moon conjunction. And in case you missed it, lunar Saros have an agreed upon birth. It's the first partial or umbral eclipse in the cycle. Whereas with the solar situation, as far as I know, which is the last time I don't want to say a lecture on this. The last time I sat in a Zoom with Mari Beauchamp, who I consider like the leading expert or one of the leading experts on lunar Saros series, he basically explained that there's a ton of information out there about solar Saros series, but some of it has actually been shown to actually not be accurate. So we can't really, as far as we know now, track the birth of a solar Saros cycle. We can still do this though. We can still look at the iterations across time. So let's just go ahead and do it. Let's pull up USA's chart. I'm always scared. I'm like, what map did I have up here before? What am I accidentally showing? Okay, so here's the US declaration. This is considered the birth chart of the United States. There's a couple tweaks that people have done to look at it a little bit differently. But if we're looking at this from from what was going on in 2008, I know that the crash was technically the next eclipse cycle, but this is definitely setting the stage for it. It was around September of 2008, so we were very much, a new eclipse had just slammed in. But if we think about 6 months earlier in that year, 2008, before the collapse of the market, especially the housing market, was imminent and we were in it, we definitely, I don't want to say should have or could have. It was a possibility that we could see the writing was on the wall. So if we sit here and we're like, okay, so what was this eclipse back in 2008 trying to get through to us on a larger, more national level? This eclipse was coming in on the United States second house. Oof, okay, second house, personal resource. Our market was collapsing. That's very much about our personal resource. And it's interesting to note too that, okay, so we look at the Aquarius energy here and we're like, okay, so where's Saturn? We already talked about Saturn being in communication with Neptune during this eclipse, and Neptune was conjunct that sun and the moon for the eclipse. But then the modern ruler of Aquarius, which gives us a more psychological lens, that's going to be Uranus. So Uranus here in this eclipse of 2008 coming in the third house, it was almost saying like, hey, wake up. You need to change the way you're thinking and perceiving things because something is going wrong or something needs to be adjusted. A lot of these angles that come in close by one of the Ptolemaic aspects, such as the quincunx, the inconjunct, that's the 150-degree angle. That's all about adjustment. But then this 165-degree angle is almost like an obsession with that adjustment, an obsession with that integration that an opposition is calling for. So if we weren't really focused on the wisdom of Uranus trying to say like, yo, it's time to rethink this, and we were more obsessed with the second house with our resources, like, oh, the market, like really being down here in the 3D, focusing way too much on our resources in a very baseline level, we might have been hit more than others when the market actually did crash. What's interesting too is that Pluto had just moved into Capricorn at that time, and a lot of people attribute all of the shakeups in the government, or, you know, why do we think about things like this, or why do we do things like that? I remember being at the National Equality March in 2009, and we were trying to overturn Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So we were trying to overturn this systematic kind of unspoken Capricorn rule that we had outgrown, that needed to kind of die and be reborn. There's just so much on that national level that was pointing to humanity trying to release these archaic or things that were there because they'd always been there, vibes within our society, within our legislature, within our culture in general, and just saying like, well, what needs to give at this point? So now if we come here and we look at the eclipse now, so we see the sun and the moon in conjunction, and it's actually in the third house. So it's saying like, let's get your act together because we are slamming in here. This is coming all in on that third house, perceptions, understandings, information. And think about how much information has been coming out. Think about the shocking amount of information that has been coming out. And then all at the time, I'm actually going to collapse this so that we're just looking at the US and this most recent eclipse of last week. We have Chiron's return, which if you know anything about me or have watched me on live streams long enough, you know Chiron has a special place in my heart. The wounded healer. Everyone has a Chiron. There's no judgment about it. Just like all men have Venus and all women have Mars. Like these energies are not mutually exclusive, nor should they be judged as good or bad. But we see Chiron asking us, kind of ripping that wound open. What is our wound around our lineage? What is our wound around our ancestry? What is our wound around our beginnings and what we were founded on? The fourth house has a lot to do with foundation. And then Pluto, where it was at 0 degrees Capricorn before, now it's right in the beginning of Aquarius. So it's almost like Pluto, god of hell, coming here to rebirth us. And it's probably going to be painful. A lot of Pluto work, they say, it's things that were really buried deep in your unconscious that you really weren't ready to live into. You weren't ready to see. You weren't ready to have that epiphany of oh my God, that's been there this whole time. And Pluto is right here on the US's south node, which means there's some sort of revelation that we as a United States society are, ready to face, but barely ready to face. We have the ability to address this, but it's going to be hard. It's going to be painful. And once again, it's in that house of resource. So what is it that we have seen as a resource that actually, when we rip it off and rip it open, we see, oh my gosh, this actually was either a lie that we were telling ourselves. This was something that we didn't understand. This is something that we were looking at through a more archaic lens, but now we are ready for that Aquarian of the future type energy. There's a lot of wisdom here within this map of the solar eclipse on the US that can kind of tell us where the next 6 months are going and what is being called into our consciousness at this time. Monologuing can be liberating, Andy said. It's funny because my husband, Sam, he has a lot of social anxiety, but he's like, Jenna, you're really good at just talking and filling time. I process things out loud. So this is a very interesting opportunity to just monologue on here because I never really considered myself the leader. My friend Suzette, when we met in 2017, I said at a meeting at that open forum, they were like, who will take on this role in the homeschool community? And I said, I'm not willing to take it on, but I'll be a strong second. And I've always kind of seen myself as a strong second. I'd love someone with me to vibe off of, but in the case that can't happen, that's totally okay. And here I am, pushed to the edge of my comfort level, but that's fine. So something that we had talked about, Kimber and I, for discussing for today's show is, oh my gosh, hide that for a second. I misspelled asking and wrote asing. I don't want to get us kicked off another platform. Let me write asking. All right. And I'm going to back it to just this one. Be honest with yourself. Where are the transits asking you to pivot lately? And the wisdom might come through looking at where is this sun and moon at 28 degrees of Aquarius? Where is that hitting your chart? What are you being asked to pivot? Where are you being asked to pivot? What is the universe kind of making more difficult for you so that you're like, well, wait a minute, path of least resistance. Rejection is just God's redirection. You can substitute spirit, universal sources redirection if God doesn't resonate with you. Where am I being asked to pivot though? And a lot of this are experiencing kind of this like, whoa, I felt that coming, but now it's here. Or, oh, I had a slight worry that was going to happen. Or now that I'm looking back over time, I can see where that pattern was trying to show itself before today, but now it's coming into slamming effect. So these are kind of questions for us to either internally process, or if you're feeling up for it, this eclipse energy is very vulnerable energy. So I don't want to overly encourage people to overshare what they're going through. But for real, if you want to, we can totally discuss it in the comments and talk about where the wisdom is within this eclipse. However, there is some information within the map of the eclipse that says we might not even know yet. We might be so wrapped up in just experiencing what's going on. We haven't been able to pull it all together yet. If you guys watch It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, or you've just seen the meme of Charlie where he's in his room and he's like freaking out and he's pointing back at something and there's all the different strings tying it all together. That is what this eclipse feels like. And the reason I say that is because, yeah, okay, we have the nodes here and we have Venus on that north node saying like, oh, if you integrate and you move towards this north node and you take the suggestion of that north node, it will restore balance in your life. But it's almost like this like tease because yes, this Venus has the aspect, but there's so many unaspected placements in this chart that it's surreal. Well, first we can say yes, Saturn and Neptune are aspecting each other. What that's called is a peregrine island. So these two are working with each other, but they're working with each other in this way that's it feels separate from the rest of what's going on. And then over here, Chiron, I know it's not a planet, but for me it is. And since I'm the only one here, we're going to pretend it is. Chiron, also unaspected, no major aspects to this planet. Like, and yes, we could say, oh, well, technically Uranus is super close to being sextile Saturn and Neptune. But when it's this far apart for outer planets, the orbs tend to tighten because the outer planets move slowly. And we're talking about Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and beyond. Those planets move slowly. So when we see an aspect that's greater than 3 degrees, especially out of orbit, or sorry, not out of orbit, especially out of quality, meaning like Aries wants to sextile to Gemini, or Aries wants to sextile to Air over here with Aquarius. And once again, we have Pluto at 4 degrees. So it's like, it's trying to get in there. They're trying to work together. But right now, it's almost like a breath period. As Uranus in July moves into Gemini, even if the orb is wider than this, we'll still feel it more because by sign, they really are making that aspect. And we can say that maybe these are in conversation with Pluto, but it's wide again. So it's a little bit tricky. And, nobody's super comfortable in the sign that they're in. Saturn's actually considered in a debilitated situation because of being in Aries. Neptune was loving being in Pisces. Aries is a little foreign to this really mystical, watery planet. Pluto, I love Pluto, so I will admit my bias, but Pluto is over here in Aquarius, and it's squaring the sign that it actually is the modern ruler of. So it's having some liberation, but it's basically when we have planets that are in signs that they're uncomfortable, and it can take their energy longer to manifest in that sign. Or it seems like they're doing a lot of extra work to get through it. It's like if you were going to have a party with 10 of your best friends, and instead of just saying like, well, let me list off who has to be there, who's my end all be all list of friends that need to make it. Boom, there's my list. I have 10 people. I can move on with my day. But debility would be kind of like, ooh, I'm going to have a party with 10 people. Let me write down the names of every single person I've ever met. What? That step seems completely irrational. But for some people, that step feels necessary. And that's that extra work that we can see when planets are in signs that they don't traditionally line up with or have an easy time expressing themselves. It can be harder for them to get to the same point or take more effort. I don't want to come down on these type of placements too hard, because I know that there's a lot of people who feel passionate about different interpretations of what that can mean to be debilitated or in fall or in detriment. Like, ooh, the energy of that. Like we talked about this recently, actually, the energy of the disrespect of fall, being like the dethroned king, that it's like, oh, that was all mine at one point and now I have nothing. Like that's that energy. So it does take longer to feel like you're going to get where you're going, especially if you were a dethroned king. But okay, so we have Pluto, we have Mars, we have this Peregrine Island here of Saturn conjunct Neptune, we have Chiron, we have so many planets that are unaspected and feel like they're operating completely outside of the we'll just call it like the agreed upon vibe of the time, where we have Jupiter in conversation, we have Uranus in conversation, we have the nodes in conversation. Like this Mercury definitely has some information from Jupiter, which then feeds back. Like you can see the interplay playing together. But then, the Mars energy, Plutonic energy, Chiron, this mess right here, like there's so, I don't mean that Saturn and Neptune, big respect, but it does feel jarring. It does feel like there's information coming in, experiences coming in that seem like they have nothing to do with anything going on. And it's like, well, what is this all about? It's interesting too, to think about it as the storm that we're going through. This, like, I saw someone call it a snowicane. So it's like a hurricane because there's this eye of the storm and there's crazy winds. And I was nervous we wouldn't even have power to do this show. But all of this energy coming around, and then snow kind of like locking us in place. It's almost like the universe is saying, like, everybody stop and just listen, or everybody stop and just watch. Everybody just pause, because the universe has this play to show us, this very interesting play where there's these characters that we're not quite sure how they fit into the script yet. but they definitely have a point, and we're waiting for that plot to develop. And maybe the pause of outside is saying, Aries is all about go, ready, set. But maybe the energy right now is saying like, yeah, we have the drive to do just go, go, go with no plan, but that's not in our highest and brightest purpose right now. So the universe is like, let's just snow them all in place and make them pause so that they can actually digest this energy, digest their experiences, digest that reflection, and come into a sense of wisdom from it. I believe we're also in the shadow of Mercury retrograde, or we're closing in on it. Mercury retrograde is all about rethinking, revisiting, reworking, going back and seeing the wisdom, seeing the messages, pausing long enough to actually receive the message. So this snowfall is almost saying, pause. We're showing you what it really, truly is to pause. Now, I don't know how much of this is actually just information that the universe is kind of telling me, Jenna, you need to pause. But I hope that this resonates with some people, because the people that I've talked to about this lately definitely can resonate with what I just said. All right, we're going to hide that one. Kimber had suggested this other question that we could talk about. Where is life asking you to roll with the transit instead of forcing the outcome? Forcing our will on things. Well, forcing our will, that can be very Aries. And what's the ruler of Aries is Mars. And those are all planets that right now, within this solar eclipse, not today now, are unaspected and kind of operating on their own. So rolling with the punches can often mean like, hey, if you're kind of locked up and unable to do anything, you have no choice but to roll with the punches here. So asking ourselves, where is that happening, and how can I relinquish some of that need for control, that need to force a certain outcome? Here's another question brought to you by Kimber. It's like she's with us, everyone. What illusion is getting reality checked for you this season? That's a really good question. What illusion? These are very Neptune inspired. And that's good because, it's Pisces season. The modern ruler of Pisces is Neptune. So we're very much putting Neptune on this center stage. And Saturn is there kind of like, if we think of Neptune, I mean, it's the 12th house that it's the modern ruler of. It has trouble with embodiment. It is that final, in Ayurveda, we talk about Vata season of life when you're becoming frail, your bone density is leaving you. A lot of times older people lose weight. Their skin gets very dry. That can be very, granted, I get it, Pisces is water, but the idea of going up into the ethers, that is very Vata season related. So it's almost like we have this Vata elder, this mystical elder here in Aries, ready to give this Aryan push even in the Vata season of life. And Saturn is here. Saturn, structure, stability, strength, determination. Is this like the stable helper that is here to almost like provide the scaffolding, provide the crutch, provide the stability to hold Neptune up so that Neptune can actually share on a wider stage all of its wisdom. So what illusion, what Neptune is getting reality checked, is getting Saturn for you this season. It can also be about like, sometimes we talk about the elders in communities who are like, well, no one listens to me, or, I should have made it big, but all this happened. And it's almost like Saturn is even calling our elders on it. Like, well, here's the structure and support. Go ahead, spread your word. How is it going to come across? How is it going to come out? You need to really be sure of your message, sure of your vision in order to bring it to other people and have them see it as an actual vision and not as illusion or delusion. So Saturn here providing structure could be super positive, or it could also be calling us on our BS. That's very very Saturn, strips away everything and kind of is like, well, what is real? What is the truth here? Even think about Saturn returns. It's interesting. People are like, oh, Saturn returns, like the initiation into adulthood and all this stuff. At the end of the day, Saturn is about identity and about getting real about your identity through the use of setting boundaries. When we talk about that first Saturn return and people are like, oh, like I had to get real and go and get a real job and stop all that daydreaming, or something came to me that had a big part of my identity kind of wrapped up in it, my actual tangible, doable purpose wrapped up in it. So I had to actually start putting effort into something that was more based in reality. Well, that has boundaries written all over it. You can no longer spend time, energy, resources dreaming up these things that aren't really meant to manifest. Now it's time to put that into action. And when we look at the second Saturn return around age 60, just before age 60, that's about that shift from productivity into passing it on. I went from being this productive adult, really creating my vision, really not necessarily vision, that's Neptune's conjunction speaking, creating what matters to me. I climbed the mountain that was the right mountain to climb. And now here I am, ready to pass that on, develop a sense of lineage. That's that third Saturn cycle. So when you see people around age 60 kind of shifting into this role of like, ooh, I really would love to have some mentees to take on, or, oh, I would love to pass on this wisdom. I'd love to pass on my resources, my books. We see a lot of wealthy people start foundations at this time or start becoming really generous givers at that time. That's another way to create lineage. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that you manifest solely on your own or take the reins of. It can be something that resonates with you that you start to pour your energy or money, resources in general into. That was a tangent. I don't know where that came from. All right. Next Kimber question. What in your life feels like it's dissolving and crystallizing at the same time? This is such a good question, because what it makes me think of, if you just think of the visual of something dissolving yet crystallizing, like I'm picturing like the chemical reaction of like when you pour some sort of solvent over things and a lot of it kind of washes away, but then there's some crystalline structure that you're left with. That crystalline structure was definitely present, at least in a particle or molecular level, within the entire mass before, but now it's able to crystallize and you're able to see it right up front. It's almost like it's being pushed right to the front. So what in your life feels like it's dissolving so that crystalline structure can come right forth and say, hey, this is me and this has been here all along, and now you're seeing it. Now you're ready to see it. Now you're ready to integrate it. And again, we can look at where these different, I don't want to say Peregrine Islands again, but because this was an instant in time, but where is Saturn conjunct Neptune coming into your chart? Where was this eclipse coming into your chart? Probably different houses for most people. That's weird. It's actually, for me, it's the 12th house. Both of them are in the 12th house, but most people will have at least one house, if not two houses of difference, to kind of show you, especially if you're using whole sign, because then no matter what, it's going to be different houses because they're in different signs. That's one thing that I talked to Kimber about this a lot. We both like to consider Placidus, but also whole sign, to see kind of the conversation almost between different astrological techniques and what it would be saying about different transits as they come in on our chart and where the wisdom is from each one. I remember Robert Hand talking about which house system is the best. And he said, okay, well, which language is more correct? French or Spanish? He probably said languages other than that, but that gives the perfect energy for it, the perfect lens. Neither one is more correct. One might have different insight, especially when we talk about, oh, there isn't really a word for XYZ in that language, but there is a bunch of words for that in this other language. Does that mean one language is more correct than the other? No, it means that you're going to get different information and a different lens due to the historic importance of whatever that topic is. Like they talk about how the Inuit have like 40 words for snow, and it's because snow was such a huge part of their life. Meanwhile, we have I don't even know in English, in American English, snow, slush, sleet, hail. It can't be more than 10. We're in a blizzard, so you would think we'd have at least a couple. So yeah, we do. So it's interesting to think about, like, okay, well, an American English speaker could describe this, but could someone with 40 words for snow describe this blizzard in a much more integrated or intricate way that would actually leave the person with, I don't want to necessarily say more information, but different information, a different lens on things. So when we look at this eclipse or any chart in general through the lens of whole sign versus Placidus versus Koch versus any of the other house systems, it's not necessarily that one negates the other, but they can actually exist, they can coexist, and instead they're in conversation, each adding their own unique flavor to whatever the recipe of outcome is in that case. All right. So these are actually great journal prompts. Thank you, Kimber, for coming up with these last minute. Mercury's strongest planet over there. One more time for the crowd. What in your life feels like it is dissolving and crystallizing at the same time? All right. I'm going to show you another question here. Where are you being asked to act in Aries while also not having the full picture yet? I love this question because, once again, it's the perfect synthesis of this Saturn-Neptune energy. First of all, action-oriented fire. So you're being asked to act, and Aries tends to act instantaneously, almost like, if it's not an F yes, then it's an F no. But if it's an F yes, let's go, go, go. All right, trademark that right now. That's my new song. Andy, you gave me homework to write a song, and that's what it is. So what are you being asked to act in Aries? Saturn, building things, discipline, determination, the long game, sustained effort over time. That sounds a lot like acting, while also not having the full picture yet. Neptune, illusion, delusion, fogginess, feeling like you don't know what's going on. Neptune is all about the surrender, waiting for the vision. And for the vision to come in, there needs to be time and space for it to come in. If you don't have the full picture yet, pause. And that can be the hardest thing about Neptune, because it's like it's about trust. You're trusting that the universe will provide. You're trusting. Pisces, so much about trust and compassion for self, compassion for the situation, compassion for how hard it is to wait for the vision to come in. That is very Neptune. So we don't have the full picture yet, but we're also being asked to act, and it can feel like we're being pulled in multiple directions all at once. And then basically what we can do is say, all right, well, for the vision to come in, we have to surrender. We have to release this feeling of control while also having the discipline to do that. So sometimes acting is more about the action of inaction. And I know that that can seem a little bit like contradictory to itself, but it's powerful to pause intentionally. Thank you, Andy, for encouraging all the random tangents of this time. I'm really impressed that we've actually gone 42 minutes and 50 seconds, considering I was like, I'll just pop on for 20 minutes. Camille, the patriarchy is dissolving in my reality. I love that you call it your reality. Yes, we're all in different realities. I love that acknowledgement. And the feminine rage and matriarchy is rising like fire. Ooh, yes, it totally is. I see it. And it's interesting because I see people kind of mocking it sometimes, or kind of being like, you're doing it the wrong way. And it's like, you know what? It's Aries, baby. We're just trying it out. We're just starting out. It's going to look a little bit messy whenever we step into Aries, when we're unfamiliar with Aries, especially coming out of that Pisces conjunction together. As we're stepping into Aries, it's like we just woke up from a dream. Of course, it can be a little bit, like when you wake up from a deep night's sleep and you try to walk to the bathroom or walk to get a glass of water. Yeah, you're stumbling a little bit. You feel that Aries go, but you are stumbling. We're getting our feet under us. And then Camille says she's not sure where this is in her chart. Well, you could probably figure it out, especially if you wanted to think about whole sign and you go with like, what is my rising sign? And then just count from there. So like, I'm an Aries rising, so whole sign would say this is in my first house. Placidus, it's in my 12th, but that's fine. Wisdom in both. Like we said, if you're a Libra rising, whole sign would say, okay, this Aries conjunction is in your 7th house. Might be different if you're looking at Placidus, though. Andy's sharing. Oh, okay. Camille, you're a Pisces rising. Okay, that's good information. So this whole sign would put it in your 2nd house. So it's almost like saying, like, let's use, where are you being asked to act in Aries around resource? And resource doesn't necessarily mean physical, tangible resources like housing or money or having the right clothing for something, or, it can mean that, but it also has to do with internal resource, things like self-confidence, things like self-assurance and self-love. Like, we do talk about self-love with regards to some of the water houses, but I definitely think it spills over into that 2nd house. The 2nd house also has those flowing angles from the water houses, 4th, 8th, and 12th. Well, 8th would be opposite. But from the 4th and from the 12th, it's this like pouring in energy through that sextile, that excitation angle. Andy was sharing, my discussion board dissolved and now I am crystallizing a new online structure. Yes, that's so good. I love that, because, and it's so interesting how many of the huge delusions, or I don't want to say dissolvings, the huge dissolving. Is there a noun for the experience of dissolving? These experiences of dissolving, we'll just say it like that. These experiences seem so deep, and in a way they almost feel unexpected. But Andy, like you said, it was only 2 days before that you and your husband, congratulations, Shane, were discussing, like, what would happen if Facebook ever took the platform away? Like, what would we do? So it's almost like there was like this like little hint from the universe saying, like, hey, maybe if you have an inspired thought to inspire this conversation, so it feels safely like you can almost imagine what that would be like. It's almost like setting the stage ever so slightly, so when the shock comes in, you had the briefest amount of familiarity with what that dissolving was going to feel like, even though it definitely took its own form. Oh yeah, no problem, Camille. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being in the chat. All right. Let's hide this one. And this was the last Kimber inspired question. Where is something in your life feeling both very real and weirdly unclear at the same time? This is actually a great question because it relates directly back to what we were just saying. Something feeling very real, but also weirdly unclear. Manifesting, well, what would I do if this was suddenly taken from me, or this suddenly no longer existed? What if Neptune came in? What would that be like? So it's like we're philosophizing things in this way that feels like it's in another dimension, like it's something that's not manifesting here on Earth, but then all of a sudden it does, and it becomes very real. It's interesting too that the human mind has all these defense mechanisms around a crisis, around trauma, around shocking, unexpected, now we're talking about Uranus, but shocking and unexpected events happening. And our mind can click over into this, like, is this really happening mode? And almost like sometimes like we forget that the thing has happened and we have to reintegrate, and it can feel re-traumatizing as we reintegrate the information. Like, we're in the after of some critical event, and it's like, oh, I forgot that happened. I was having a brief lapse into life before that happened. Oh, like when you wake up from a dream and you're like, oh, I thought it was a dream, but this is actually real life. Oh, I thought I dreamt that, but here we are. It's almost like there's a wisdom within that tricking of the self, within that, like, oh, I forgot that happened. As much as it's so painful when you have the recollection, there was a time of peace within that, oh, I forgot time. And I think ultimately we're not necessarily trying to forget things, but we're moving towards this space of not being emotionally impacted in it. And it's almost as if we forgot it. I'm tying in Taylor Swift now. You know that song, I Forgot That You Existed by Taylor Swift? I love that song so much because it's not saying that she truly forgot. It just stopped impacting her. she had integrated that experience, that pain, that hurt, that loss. That's why I really, a lot of us do this, lean on music during times of crises or times of great adjustment, or the wisdom that comes through music, even music without words. And I want to impress upon us how much music not the most Neptunian form of art that there is. That's something that Robert Hand was talking about, because it's almost like when we play music, it's so beautiful and it's an art form, and we're experiencing art, and we're experiencing the emotions, the very tangible, real shifts in cognizance that come from music. We are experiencing that. But as soon as the song ends, it's gone. It evaporates. And we know Neptune it's about many things. It's also about art and creativity. So that it could be the most Neptunian form of art is live music. So leaning on that during this time, leaning on music to be like a conduit or be some sort of mode of transmission, that might actually be a great way to lean into this energy, especially if the physical earth weather around you is forcing a pause, or, your own emotional weather is forcing a pause. If you feel like, okay, this situation is too much, I'm going to withdraw from it. Or, oh, I literally can't go outside because there's 30 inches of snow that have already fallen in the past hour, Massachusetts, Rhode Island. That pause in there, what can we do to make that feel a little bit more less threatening, a little bit more approachable? How can I sit with myself in this forced, pregnant pause right here? Music could be a great way to move through that and connect with the wisdom of the time. I love meditating, but I definitely am a person, I'm very fiery, and this chart is fiery. I am a person who needs activeness during it, either a guided meditation, some level of music going on, some level of breath work going on, something to actually anchor my mind to. And I think that could be helpful for a lot of people under this transit. So in addition to all these questions that we have come up with, I'm going to stop sharing. I'm so learning new things every day. We're all learning. It's all learning all the time. Something that I've recently embraced. There's no such thing as truly becoming the master of anything, because new information is always coming via the planets, via the transits, via new astrological experiences that we hadn't had before, offering a new lens, maybe even on the information that we are ready to revisit or ready to integrate in a new way, a deeper way, an additional way. It doesn't necessarily have to be deeper. But your homework, it's optional homework, you don't have to do it, is to sit in a pause, because I'm sure there's pauses coming up. Sit in that forced waiting period that Neptune is calling for, and call in some music for that time. Meditation through truly connecting with music. And it can be any music. It doesn't have to be Taylor Swift. No, just kidding. I would recommend, though, in order for the vision to come through as clearly as possible, I think music without lyrics would be an additional challenge through this. So, all right. I'm going to wrap a couple minutes early unless there's any more questions. Thank you, everyone who could be here today. Thank you, Kimber, for these prompts. Camille, Andy, Jill, thanks for coming. Talk to you later.